Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the International Conference GCI 2024, Global Challenges and Innovations. Interdisciplinary Approaches to Modern Scientific Issues, de la Salle Araneta University, Philippines, where we gather to celebrate global innovations in modern science. Congratulations to all participants for their outstanding contributions and dedication to advancing knowledge in their respective fields. I wish you all a successful and inspiring conference, filled with productive discussions and groundbreaking discoveries. We invite Mrs. Kathleen Aviso to speak. The topic of his speech is modeling the economic impact and ripple effects of disease outbreaks.
The global economic landscape has been profoundly impacted by various health crises, and the outbreak of the coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, serves as a particularly stark example of how disease can extend its reach far beyond public health, disrupting economies on multiple levels. As a highly contagious disease, COVID-19 spread rapidly across borders, amplifying the vulnerabilities in global supply chains. From its origins in Wuhan, China, the virus's exponential spread has caused considerable losses in human lives, global manufacturing output, and economic productivity. This paper explores the methods of evaluating the economic vulnerability that cascades through supply chains due to disease outbreaks, examining impacts at the firm, national, and global levels. With the aid of economic models, epidemiological data, and network analysis techniques, the paper aims to develop strategies for understanding, mitigating, and forecasting the economic consequences of such outbreaks. The exponential spread and economic ripple effects the emergence of COVID-19 exemplifies the growing risks faced by interconnected global economies. COVID-19 was first reported in December 2019, and by February 2020, over 89,000 cases had been confirmed globally. The virus's basic reproduction number, R0, which indicates the number of people that can be infected by a single individual, ranged between 2 and 6.47, with an average of 3.58, Liu et al. 2020. This high transmissibility made COVID-19 more contagious than several previous outbreaks such as SARS and MERS-CoV, which had lower R0 values. As a result, countries around the world imposed travel restrictions, quarantines, and lockdowns to curb the virus's spread. Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak, is home to several global manufacturing hubs, including automobile plants operated by General Motors, Hyundai, and Toyota, Connally, 2020. The pandemic caused these factories, along with multinational companies like Apple, Starbucks, and McDonald's, to halt production, leading to significant disruptions in global supply chains. By the end of January 2020, air travel in China had declined by 40%, and this decline was expected to persist, IATA, 2020. The economic impact was not confined to China but rippled across the globe, as countries reliant on Chinese manufacturing for raw materials and products faced shortages, delays, and rising costs. The challenge of modeling economic impact. Various studies have examined the economic impact of pandemics, with different approaches and models attempting to quantify the costs associated with disease outbreaks. Econometric and statistical models have traditionally been used to estimate the impact of pandemics. For instance, Meltzer et al., 1999, estimated the potential economic loss from an influenza pandemic in the United States without considering multiplier effects, which can amplify losses, particularly in workforce availability. Other studies, such as Butels et al., 2009, and Keogh Brown and Smith, 2008, found that the economic impact of outbreaks like SARS and MERS-CoV was minimal in the long term, often due to the postponement of consumption rather than a permanent reduction. However, these models often fail to account for the cascading effects across sectors and regions. Leontief's input-output model, 1936, which accounts for the direct and indirect impacts of disruptions on the economy, has been extended to an inoperability input-output model to measure the economic consequences of workforce absenteeism during a pandemic. L. Haimar and Santos, 2015. This model highlights the indirect effects, such as those caused by the absence of workers, including those who care for sick family members or are forced to remain at home due to school closures. For example, in the UK, absenteeism rates due to school closures can be as high as 16.1%, Sadiq et al. 2008, which exacerbates the shortage of workers, particularly in healthcare. At the global level, the complexity of interdependencies across economies requires more sophisticated multi-regional analysis. For example, Duan et al. 2018 used multi-regional models to assess the trade effects of disruptions, while Wang et al. 2020 employed a similar approach to examine the sustainability of global supply chains. However, these approaches have yet to fully capture the economic vulnerability stemming from disease outbreaks. The use of multi-regional input-output databases published by organizations such as the OECD and the Asian Development Bank is critical for evaluating the ripple effects that disease outbreaks generate across sectors and countries. As production networks become increasingly globalized, disruptions due to labor shortages, travel restrictions, and plant closures can trigger cascading impacts that extend beyond the initially affected regions. Coupling disease transmission with economic models. The integration of disease transmission models with economic models is crucial for more accurately predicting the economic consequences of pandemics. Traditional epidemiological models, such as the Susceptible Infectious Recovered (SIR) model, describe the dynamics of disease spread but must be coupled with economic models to account for the effects of workforce absenteeism and other indirect impacts. For instance, mobility data and the spread of infection can be integrated into economic models to estimate the workforce availability and the resulting economic loss. This dynamic approach allows for more accurate forecasts of the economic impact of pandemics. Additionally, sensitivity analysis can be applied to account for variability in recovery rates and transmission rates. By examining different scenarios based on the severity of the outbreak, policymakers can evaluate the likely economic outcomes and develop more effective intervention strategies. For example, stockpiling essential goods and improving hospital infrastructure are strategies that can mitigate the effects of pandemics on production and trade. Implications for risk management. The COVID-19 pandemic underscores the central role of human resources in economic operations and highlights the vulnerabilities in global supply chains. To build resilience against future outbreaks, it is essential to develop risk management frameworks that consider the interdependencies across different regions, sectors, and countries. These frameworks should include strategies such as the development of disease surveillance databases, the establishment of streamlined processes for vaccine deployment, and the creation of emergency response plans at local, national, and international levels. Moreover, the application of optimization models in risk management can help identify the most cost-effective interventions. For instance, optimizing resource allocation during a crisis can reduce the impact on production while ensuring that critical sectors, such as healthcare, remain functional. The use of big data and network analysis can further improve decision-making by providing real-time insights into the spread of the disease and the associated economic impact. Conclusion. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the vulnerabilities inherent in the interconnected global economy and demonstrated the need for more robust economic models that account for both direct and indirect impacts. By combining economic models with epidemiological data and network analysis, it is possible to better understand the ripple effects of disease outbreaks and develop strategies to mitigate their economic impact. Future research should focus on creating comprehensive, multi-level frameworks for assessing the economic consequences of pandemics and developing risk management strategies to safeguard against future disruptions. Through these efforts, economies can better prepare for and respond to the next global health crisis.
We invite Mr. Chen Xiaogang to speak. The topic of his speech is interstitial water exchange processes in mangroves and salt marsh wetlands and their carbon sink potential.
The negative impact of global climate change on resources, ecology, and the environment is becoming increasingly apparent. Hence, reducing the atmospheric carbon dioxide, CO2, concentration has become a global concern. Intertidal wetlands, e.g., mangroves and salt marshes, have strong carbon sink functions that can reduce the CO2 concentration, thus mitigating global climate change. Mangroves and salt marshes are important coastal blue carbon ecosystems characterized by high soil carbon storage. Poor water exchange and associated carbon exchange driven by tides and rainfall in mangroves and salt marshes are challenging issues when estimating the effects of coastal blue carbon sinks. Large amounts of poor water-derived sediment carbon outwellings remain in the ocean and may represent an important carbon sink. However, they are poorly understood, despite being potentially significant components of the salt marsh carbon budget. This review aims to quantify the poor water exchange rate and related carbon fluxes, analyze their driving mechanisms, and reassess the carbon budgets and carbon sink potentials of mangroves and salt marshes. This study promotes understanding the carbon balance and cycle processes associated with mangrove and salt marsh ecosystems, and provides a scientific basis for the construction, protection, and sustainable development of coastal blue carbon sinks in the context of global climate change. Global climate change has had increasingly negative impacts on resources, ecology, and the environment. As a result, reducing atmospheric carbon dioxide, CO2, concentrations has become a global priority. Intertidal wetlands, such as mangroves and salt marshes, play a crucial role in carbon sequestration, serving as significant carbon sinks that can mitigate global climate change. These coastal blue carbon ecosystems are characterized by high soil carbon storage and the ability to absorb and store CO2 from the atmosphere. However, estimating the effects of coastal blue carbon sinks is complicated by the poor water exchange, PEX, processes driven by tides and rainfall, which facilitate carbon exchange in these ecosystems. This review aims to quantify the PEX rate and related carbon fluxes, analyze their driving mechanisms, and reassess the carbon budgets and carbon sink potentials of mangroves and salt marshes. Understanding these processes is essential for the construction, protection, and sustainable development of coastal blue carbon sinks in the context of global climate change. Coastal zones and climate change. The coastal zone, where ocean and land interact, is a complex and fragile area of the global ecosystem. It is home to about 61% of the world's population and two-thirds of its cities. Rapid economic development and population growth have accelerated urbanization, increasing human activities, and exacerbating the challenges posed by global climate change. Addressing these challenges requires a dual approach, developing and utilizing green energy, and enhancing CO2 fixation. Importance of mangroves and salt marshes. Mangroves and salt marshes are effective at sequestering carbon, significantly increasing CO2 fixation. Research on carbon sequestration and storage in these coastal wetlands has gained attention due to their importance as atmospheric carbon sinks. The carbon cycle in these ecosystems includes carbon burial in sediments, vertical exchange with the atmosphere, and lateral transport to adjacent waters. Lateral export comprises both surface and subsurface components, with PEX playing a crucial role in the subsurface carbon exchange. PEX involves the exchange of groundwater and surface water at the interface between sediments and overlying water. This process, driven by tides, rainfall, and bioturbation, facilitates the lateral transport of dissolved inorganic carbon, DIC, and other carbon forms from intertidal wetlands to the ocean. Despite its significance, PEX is often overlooked in carbon cycle studies of mangroves and salt marshes. Mechanisms of pore water exchange PEX processes are influenced by various factors, including topography, flow fields, and biological activities. Bioturbation, such as the creation of crab holes, increases the contact area between sediments and overlying water, enhancing terrestrial material transport to the sea. PEX can occur in both bare flats and vegetated areas, with vegetation contributing significant carbon sources through root and litter degradation. Submarine groundwater discharge, SGD, is another important concept related to coastal groundwater surface water exchange. SGD includes all water flows from the land-sea interface into adjacent sea areas, comprising terrestrial freshwater and recycled seawater. PEX, on the other hand, primarily involves recycled seawater driven by tidal forces, making it a significant component of SGD research methods. Quantifying PEX rates is challenging due to the complexity of hydrodynamic processes in mangroves and salt marshes. Three main research methods are used: direct measurement, hydrological modeling, and isotope tracing. Direct measurements, such as seepage meters, provide accurate local data but are impractical for larger areas. Hydrological models, like Darcy's law and numerical simulations, offer insights into exchange processes and mechanisms but require extensive hydrogeological data. Isotope tracing, particularly with radon isotopes 222Rn, is the most effective method, providing high-resolution data on PEX processes and carbon fluxes. Global research and gaps research on PEX in mangroves and salt marshes is limited, with most studies conducted in regions like Australia, the United States, and China. There is a need for more research in underrepresented areas such as South America, Africa, and polar regions to better understand PEX on a global scale. Additionally, the interaction between multiple factors affecting PEX, long-term observational data, and uncertainties in research methods need further investigation to improve the accuracy of carbon sink assessments. Mangrove and salt marsh blue carbon ecosystems have strong carbon sink potential, which is manifested through two pathways: carbon burial and soil PEX. Although existing research results show that the carbon flux of the soil PEX process is as important as the carbon sink process in mangrove and salt marsh blue carbon ecosystems, the research on the PEX process relative to carbon burial is neither at the regional scale nor at the global scale. There is still quite a lack of scientific research, especially in salt marsh wetlands, and some scientific issues still need to be studied in depth. 1. Global scale estimation. At present, research cases on PEX processes in mangroves and salt marsh wetlands are mainly concentrated in regions such as Australia, the United States, and China, while there are very few studies in South America, Africa, and polar regions. Related research is needed in these regions to better conduct global-scale research. Calculate. 2. PEX action mechanism. Affected by the interaction between water and sand dynamics, vegetation distribution, topography, and intertidal animals, the PEX process in mangroves and salt marsh wetlands is extremely complex. Most current studies only consider a single factor on the PEX process, but cannot explain PEX and its carbon output under the combined effect of multiple factors. Therefore, it is necessary to couple these comprehensive effects to analyze the PEX action mechanism and carbon sink regulation process in mangroves and salt marsh wetlands, and then lay a solid theoretical foundation for accurate calculation of PEX carbon sink potential. 3. Long-term observations and their controlling factors. How climate change, sea level rise, land use, and extreme weather such as typhoons change many processes such as PEX in mangroves and salt marsh wetlands, and the factors that control them remain unclear. Different from long-term observations of rivers and atmospheric deposition, there is currently a lack of long-term observation data of the PEX process, and there is an urgent need to establish long-term relevant experimental stations in the field. Based on the observation data obtained from the long-term experimental station, the controlling factors and dynamic laws of the long-term process are analyzed, and the future change trend of the PEX carbon sink potential of mangroves and salt marsh wetlands under the influence of the long-term process is predicted, thereby serving the national dual carbon strategy. 4. Uncertainties such as research methods. Whether at the regional scale or the global scale, the uncertainty of PEX has always been the difficulty and focus of relevant research. These uncertainties are reflected in the selection of methods, the spatiotemporal heterogeneity of wetlands, the joint action of multiple driving forces, etc., and need to be considered. Interpret from a mechanistic perspective and combine with numerical simulations or models to improve and enhance the accuracy of assessment. Therefore, in future research, it is necessary to conduct cross-integration with other disciplines in order to reduce PEX errors caused by uncertainties such as research methods, promote the research and development of PEX and carbon sink functions of mangroves and salt marsh wetlands, and then propose an effective way to maintain the sustainable and healthy development of mangroves and salt marsh wetlands. The negative impacts of global climate change on resources, ecology, and the environment are increasingly apparent, and reducing atmospheric CO2 concentration has become the focus of global attention. Intertidal wetlands, such as mangroves and salt marshes, have strong carbon sink functions and are an important way to reduce CO2 concentration and slow down global climate change. Mangroves and salt marshes are important coastal blue carbon ecosystems, and their soils have extremely high carbon storage capacity. Controlled by driving forces such as tides and rainfall, the interstitial water carbon exchange process in mangrove and salt marsh soils has greater uncertainty in the estimation of coastal blue carbon sinks. At the same time, the water carbon exchange process in the interstitial space between mangroves and salt marshes is also a cutting-edge scientific issue in research related to coastal blue carbon sinks, which is quite challenging. Interstitial water exchange between mangroves and salt marshes promotes the export and storage of carbon in large amounts of sediments to the ocean. It may be another important carbon sink in addition to carbon burial in wetlands, but this has not yet been systematically studied. The summary describes the soil interstitial water exchange rate in mangrove and salt marsh habitats and its blue carbon flux and controlling factors. It is expected to be used in the assessment of the blue carbon budget and carbon sink potential of global mangrove and salt marsh ecosystems. The blue carbon flux carried by the interstitial water process has attracted sufficient attention. This will deepen the understanding of the carbon balance and cycle process of mangroves and salt marsh ecosystems, and further provide a better way to better utilize the blue carbon sink function of coastal zones and promote the development of mangrove and salt marsh ecosystems in the context of global climate change. Provide scientific support for construction and protection as well as sustainable development of coastal zones. Figure 3. Research on gas hysteresis effect in intertidal wetlands. Conclusion: mangroves and salt marshes are critical coastal blue carbon ecosystems with significant carbon sequestration potential. Poor water exchange processes play a vital role in the carbon balance and cycling of these ecosystems, yet they are often overlooked. By enhancing our understanding of PEX mechanisms and their contributions to carbon sequestration, we can better assess the carbon sink potential of mangroves and salt marshes. This knowledge is essential for the development of effective strategies to mitigate global climate change and support the sustainable management of coastal blue carbon sinks.
We invite Mr. Mohammed Mustafa Akan to speak. The topic of his speech is productivity of maritime transportation in Turkey.
Maritime transport plays a pivotal role in international trade, facilitating the movement of goods across global markets. It is the backbone of international commerce, handling the majority of trade volumes due to its cost-effectiveness and efficiency. For countries like Turkey with a strategic geographical position, enhancing maritime transport capabilities is crucial for economic growth. This thesis aims to analyze the factors affecting the performance of maritime transport in Turkey, using data from various sources and applying statistical models to provide insights and recommendations for improvement. The role of maritime transport in global trade. Maritime transport has been integral to global trade for centuries. It connects continents and enables the efficient movement of large volumes of goods. In 2019, over 11 billion tons of cargo were transported via sea, highlighting its dominance in international trade. Compared to road, rail, and air transport, maritime transport offers unparalleled capacity and cost benefits, making it the preferred mode for long-distance and bulk shipments. Turkey's geographical and strategic position. Turkey's unique geographical position at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, and its proximity to the Middle East provides significant advantages for maritime transport. The country's extensive coastline and strategic ports serve as vital hubs for international trade routes. The Turkish straits, including the Bosporus and Dardanelles, are critical passageways for maritime traffic, enhancing Turkey's role in global trade. Factors affecting maritime transport performance. The performance of maritime transport is influenced by several factors, including infrastructure quality, technological advancements, and regulatory frameworks. Efficient port facilities, modern ships, and advanced logistics systems are essential for optimizing maritime transport operations. Additionally, government policies and international regulations play a significant role in shaping the maritime transport landscape. Methodology and data analysis. This study utilizes data from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, and Turkey's Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. The generalized linear model method and Poisson distribution are applied to analyze the data, providing a robust statistical framework to identify and weight the factors affecting maritime transport performance in Turkey. Current state of maritime transport in Turkey. Maritime transport is crucial for Turkey's foreign trade, with a significant portion of exports and imports being conducted via sea. The use of containers has become increasingly prevalent, improving the efficiency of cargo handling and transport. Despite some fluctuations, the overall trend indicates a positive growth trajectory in maritime transport volumes. Comparative analysis with other transport modes. While maritime transport is the most cost-effective and efficient mode for large-scale and long-distance shipments, other transport modes like road, rail, and air have their own advantages. This chapter compares these modes, highlighting the unique benefits and limitations of each. Maritime transport stands out for its ability to handle bulk cargo and its lower cost per ton-mile compared to other modes. Policy implications and recommendations. To enhance the performance of maritime transport, strategic policies are needed. Investments in port infrastructure, adoption of advanced technologies, and streamlined regulatory frameworks are essential for optimizing operations. This chapter provides policy recommendations aimed at improving Turkey's maritime transport capabilities and addressing existing challenges. Economic impact and future prospects. Improving maritime transport infrastructure and policies can significantly boost Turkey's economy. Enhanced efficiency in maritime operations leads to reduced costs, increased trade volumes, and greater economic growth. This chapter explores the long-term economic benefits and future prospects for Turkey's maritime transport sector, emphasizing the importance of continued investment and development. Maritime transportation has an important place in both international trade and economic development of Turkey. For this reason, it is essential for our country to carry out studies to increase the performance of the relevant transportation mode. As seen in Table 6, the cargo transported by container and container port efficiency also have a high impact on performance. In this context, making our ports more suitable for container transportation and modernizing them with systems that will facilitate the handling of various cargoes can increase the performance even further. When we look at the data on our country's trade fleet and the number of ships traded in ports between the years covered by the study, it can be stated that it followed a decreasing trend. Based on the findings obtained in the study, the effect of these two variables on performance is neutral. In this regard, improving our country's commercial fleet, both numerically and qualitatively, seems to be an important necessity in order to increase its share in maritime transportation. Conclusion: the analysis underscores the critical role of maritime transport in Turkey's economic development. By addressing the factors affecting performance and implementing strategic policies, Turkey can enhance its maritime transport capabilities, driving economic growth and strengthening its position in global trade. Future research should focus on emerging trends and technological advancements to ensure sustainable growth in the maritime transport sector.
We invite Mr. Macario Cordell II to speak. The topic of his speech is beamforming pointing error of a triaxial velocity sensor under gain uncertainties beamforming pointing error of a triaxial velocity sensor under gain uncertainties.
A triaxial velocity sensor consists of three uniaxial velocity sensors, nominally identical, orthogonally oriented, and co-centered at a point in space. This system measures the acoustic particle velocity vector, offering two-dimensional spatial directivity despite its compact size. Existing analyses of its beam pattern assume ideal gain uniformity across the sensors. However, practical deviations due to gain uncertainties can shift the beam pattern's peak direction. This paper models such uncertainties stochastically, deriving the statistical mean and variance of these deviations. Analytical results are validated using Monte Carlo simulations. Triaxial velocity sensors are extensively used for measuring acoustic particle velocity vectors due to their compact and efficient design. Each sensor component captures one Cartesian component of the velocity, enabling azimuth elevation directivity. However, real-world manufacturing and deployment introduce gain uncertainties among the three uniaxial sensors. This paper investigates the statistical effects of such gain uncertainties on the spatial match filter beam pattern's peak direction. Theoretical model ideal array manifold. The ideal mathematical model of a triaxial velocity sensors array manifold is A, theta, phi, sad phase, sin, and theta, cos, phi, at sin, and theta, sin, and phi, at cos, and theta, where theta is an element of 0, pi, is the polar angle measured from the z-axis, and phi is an element of 0, 2 pi, is the azimuth angle measured from the x-axis. Each component corresponds to the uniaxial velocity sensor's orientation along the x, y, and z-axis, respectively. The array manifold remains independent of frequency and emitter sensor distance due to the collocation of the uniaxial sensors. This independence is advantageous for broad-frequency acoustic events. Array manifold under gain uncertainties. Practical gain uncertainties are modeled stochastically. The actual array manifold becomes theta, phi, sad phase, g underscore x at g underscore y at g underscore z, a, theta, phi, where g underscore x, g underscore y, and g underscore z are independent Gaussian random variables with mean 1 and variance sigma underscore g caret 2. The symbol represents the Hadamard element-wise product. Statistical analysis of beamforming pointing error. Given gain uncertainties, the beam pattern's peak direction deviates from the nominal look direction, theta underscore L, phi underscore L. The derived expressions for the statistical mean and variance of the deviation are as follows. For the azimuth direction, bias, and E, phi underscore P phi underscore L equals F underscore 1 sigma underscore G, comma at variance, and var, phi underscore P equals F underscore 2 sigma underscore G, comma, where F underscore 1 and F underscore 2 are derived functions of sigma underscore G. For the polar direction, biased, and E, theta underscore P theta underscore L equals F underscore 3 sigma underscore G, comma at variance, and var, theta underscore P equals F underscore 4 sigma underscore G, dot. Monte Carlo simulations. Monte Carlo simulations validate the derived biases and variances. Each trial involves sampling g underscore x, g underscore y, and g underscore z from the specified Gaussian distribution. Computing the bias beam pattern peak, theta underscore p, phi underscore p. Comparing results across multiple trials to verify analytical expressions. The following scenarios were analyzed: look direction, theta underscore L, phi underscore L, sad phase 40 carat ring operator, 30 carat ring operator. Look direction, theta underscore L, phi underscore L, sad phase 30 carat ring operator, 50 carat ring operator. Look direction, theta underscore L, phi underscore L, sad phase 70 carat ring operator, 20 carat ring operator. Results figures demonstrate that biases and variances from Monte Carlo simulations align closely with analytical predictions. The deviation grows with increasing sigma underscore G, but remains within predictable bounds. Conclusion: this study derived and verified the statistical biases and variances in the beam pattern's peak direction due to gain uncertainties in triaxial velocity sensors. Future work will extend the analysis to include correlated gain errors and non-Gaussian models.
We invite Mrs. Bernardita Churchill to speak. The topic of his speech is enhancing the study and teaching of Philippine history and culture towards inclusivity and truth.
The integration of primary documents, survivor testimonies, and scholarly analyses into the curriculum can provide students with a nuanced understanding of this critical period. Towards an inclusive history, recognizing marginalized communities. The dominant narrative of Philippine history often centers on the experiences of Christian lowland Filipinos, neglecting the rich histories and cultures of Muslim and indigenous peoples. This omission reinforces stereotypes, perpetuates discrimination, and alienates these communities from the broader national identity. The history of Muslim Filipinos have played a significant role in resisting colonial rule and preserving their cultural heritage. From the establishment of the sultanates of Sulu and Maguindanao to their struggles against Spanish, American, and post-independence governments, their history is marked by resilience and resistance. Including these narratives in history curricula fosters understanding and appreciation of their contributions to the nation. The history of indigenous peoples, IPS, the indigenous peoples of the Philippines, comprising diverse ethno-linguistic groups, possess unique traditions, governance systems, and worldviews. Their histories often highlight their relationship with the environment, struggles for ancestral land rights, and resistance to assimilation. Recognizing these contributions enriches the national narrative and promotes cultural pride. Enhancing the study and teaching of Philippine history to create an inclusive and accurate history, several key actions are necessary. Curriculum reforms integrate the histories of Muslims and IPS into all levels of education, emphasizing their cultural and historical significance. Ensure that critical periods like martial law are taught with comprehensive and factual resources. Teacher training provide educators with specialized training to teach sensitive and complex historical topics effectively. Develop resources that equip teachers to handle diverse perspectives and foster critical thinking among students. Use of multimodal resources incorporate multimedia tools such as documentaries, oral histories, and digital archives to engage students and present diverse viewpoints. Leverage technology to make historical materials accessible to a wider audience. Community collaboration engage with Muslim and indigenous communities to co-create historical materials that authentically represent their experiences and voices. Encourage partnerships between schools, local historians, and cultural organizations. Critical thinking and historical analysis promote activities that encourage students to analyze sources, question biases, and draw their conclusions about historical events. Use project-based learning to deepen understanding of historical complexities. The role of inclusive history in nation-building. And inclusive history fosters national unity by acknowledging the diverse experiences and contributions of all Filipinos. It challenges monolithic narratives and empowers marginalized communities by validating their stories. This approach not only enriches historical understanding but also promotes empathy, respect, and social cohesion. Conclusion: revisiting and enhancing the teaching of Philippine history is a vital step toward truth and inclusivity. By addressing the distortions of historical revisionism and integrating the narratives of marginalized communities, educators can cultivate a generation of informed and critical thinkers. This effort requires the collaboration of educators, policymakers, historians, and communities to ensure that Philippine history reflects the nation's rich diversity and complex past. An inclusive history is not just a reflection of the past, it is a foundation for a just and united future.
So, we sincerely thank all participants of the GCI 2024 Global Challenges and Innovations, Interdisciplinary Approaches to Modern Scientific Issues. Special thanks to Mrs. Kathleen Avizo and Bernardita Churchill from De La Salle Araneta University, Philippines, for organizing the conference. We invite everyone to our next conference. Thank you. See you soon.